Welcome back to our course on Dreamweaver CC. In the last section we published our Springs Park website in its very simple form to the web for the first time, and it can now be seen online. In this section I'm going to do a little bit more work to the site, and in particular I'm going to improve the look of that single page. I'm going to add a second page and some linkage between the two pages. One of the things to bear in mind as I start to show you various aspects of how to format these pages is that over time, as your knowledge becomes greater and as you become aware of the options that are available to you when you're designing and formatting web pages, the way we do things at first isn't necessarily how you will choose to do them later on, because it's very much the case that the approach to use needs to be fitted not only to your own personal preferences but also to the particular situation in hand. So what I'm going to show you now is not ultimately going to prove to be the ideal way to do these things, but it does involve you finding out about some very important aspects of formatting pages in Dreamweaver. Now all I'm going to do is to improve the formatting of this home page, and I'm going to basically move that text "Welcome to Springs Park" a little bit further down the page, choose a different font and make the text larger and center it on the page. And while we're doing this, I want you to look at what happens to the code in the page. Now then, I've positioned the cursor to the left of "Welcome to Springs Park." Watch what happens now if I press the Enter key. What I get is effectively a blank paragraph. And the HTML code for that is P, which is a paragraph marker, ampersand NBSP semicolon, and then a second marker. These markers are called HTML tags, and the second tag is /P. Now for virtually all of the HTML tags that you're going to come across, they tend to come in pairs. And on the left beginning we've got a P, which is a start paragraph. On the right we've got /P, which is an end paragraph, and between them is that funny code ampersand NBSP semicolon. Now that stands for a non-breaking space, and you'll use quite a few non-breaking space characters. It basically puts a space somewhere that you want to keep there. With HTML there are various situations in which spaces are not significant. They can be visually removed. You can get spaces sometimes where you weren't expecting to get spaces and so on. But fixed spaces, non-breaking spaces, you can control yourself. So when I press the Enter key there, I put in an empty paragraph containing just a non-breaking space. And if I do the same thing again, you won't be surprised to see what happens. There's another one, there's another one, and there's another one. And Dreamweaver is basically updating the HTML code all the time that I'm working in design view. I'm actually working in the design panel on this page. Now before we move on, let me just point out something else very important in the code there. The HTML code for the page begins with a tag that's a doctype tag. I'll tell you more about some of these special tags like doctype tags a little bit later on. But after the doctype tag you get HTML, and if you look right down at the bottom there is the end HTML tag. So it goes HTML, that's where it starts, /HTML, that's where it ends. That pair of tags basically contain all of the working HTML on this page. Within the page I have a section that begins head and ends at /head. So there's the head section. And in fact, if I go down to the status bar at the bottom and click on that head tag, it selects the whole of the head section of the page. This is basically the header of the page, but not as in, say, a header on a letter or something like that. And again, I'll come back to that a little bit later on as well. But the main content of the page is in what's called the body section. So let me click somewhere inside the body. Note the tags down there. If I click on body, it selects the whole body of the page, so that's everything from the body tag to the slash body tag, and anywhere within there, if I say click here and click on that P tag, a paragraph tag, I just select that paragraph. Similarly, if I go into the words Welcome to Springs Park and click on the P tag, I select the whole of that particular paragraph. So that's how the tags and the status bar can work together. Another important point to note here is that we have currently two tags on the status bar, body and P, and they say that wherever we have the cursor at the moment, wherever we have selected, it tells us the nesting of the relevant tags. So on the outside we've got the body tag. I suppose you might argue that we've got the HTML tags actually, but it basically starts at the level below HTML. So it says we have the body tag, and then within the body tag we have a P tag, and it's within that P tag that we currently have the cursor or the selection. Now, as your pages become more complex, the number of tags and the level of nesting of those tags is going to increase quite considerably. Now, as I mentioned right near the beginning of the course, I make no apologies for the fact that we're looking at this HTML code, because it is important that you can understand some of it and that you can certainly interpret what's going on in your pages. So far I've changed our page working in the design half of split view there. Now let me make a change in the code half of it. Let's suppose, for example, that I wanted to put in another empty paragraph. I can just type it in like this. Soon as I type that left angle bracket, it offers me all of the available HTML tags, and there are quite a lot of them. I can just type P, or I can select it from there, double click, close that. Now watch what happens when I start to type ampersand, NBSP, etc. Put in the ampersand, and it knows that one of the ones I might want there is NBSP semicolon, and it also offers me various other standard characters, strings of characters that it might want in there. For instance, acute accent, ampersand symbol, and so on. I want the non-breaking space. Now again, open the angle bracket. Soon as I type the slash symbol, it knows that the tag I'm due to close is a P, so it basically does all of that for me. Now, having done that, you may recall we really need to do a refresh, and you can see the refresh in the design half of the view on the right there. Now when it comes to styling pages, one approach is to use HTML tags, and as you can see, apart from there being many tags, they have many attributes, different things you can do with those tags, so you finish up with a pretty flexible system. However, there is an alternative way of styling pages that we're going to look at in more detail later on, using CSS. And in fact, for most people nowadays, CSS is the more sophisticated and powerful way of doing things. I personally believe you need to know about both, and in fact most web designers, most web pages have an element of both in them. So even when you're basing your design on the use of CSS, understanding HTML is pretty important as well. So we're starting off with HTML, and we're going to look at CSS in more detail later on. Now let's do those couple of other things to this page before we go too much farther. If you look at the properties panel at the bottom, reflecting those two approaches to styling, there are two buttons. There are some CSS options and there are some HTML options. Let's look at the HTML options. That's the ones that we're going to use now. And one or two of the things that we can do now use HTML. And some of the options that we've got here can be used to quickly apply HTML formatting to something on the page. So what I'm going to do now is to select in design view the words Welcome to Springs Park, and then I'm going to press that B button there, which will make that text bold. Now look at what happened in the code. within the paragraph, an HTML tag strong is put before Welcome to Springs Park and /strong after it. And the pair of strong tags indicate some bold text. Similarly, let me just make that selection again. I could make them bold italic by clicking on the I italic button, and then what you get is P strong M. Paragraph, strong means bold, M means emphasis, which is italic in this case, Welcome to Springs Park, and then each of those three tags gets closed again. Now for the moment there's just one other thing that I want to do to this page. In Design View, I'm going to click within Welcome to Springs Park, and then on the Format menu, one of the options there is Align, and then within Align I'm going to choose Center Aligned. That has a keyboard shortcut, as do most of these commands. Now Welcome to Springs Park is center aligned horizontally on the page. Now notice what that has done in the HTML code. It hasn't put in an extra pair of tags. What it's done is to modify the P, the paragraph tag, and changed it to align equals, and then in double quotes, center. And that's how to center align a whole paragraph. The center alignment applies to the whole paragraph, not just to the characters or words that I have selected. So there again you can see how the attributes of the paragraph tag can be used to achieve even more options within the formatting. Now there's just one other thing I'd like to do here, and that is I'm going to switch back to Design View, and I want you to look at what happens to that Welcome to Springs Park page. You notice how the text is now centered on a much wider page, and we'll be looking at page width and the width of the screen and the usable part of a web page and so on later on, but for the moment, as you can see, it is still centered. And something I mentioned earlier, and again we'll be looking at this in more detail later on, is that you can also look at live view, which for a static website is going to give you a pretty good idea of how your page is going to look. So let's try live view. Not very much difference there really, but again it just confirms how that page is going to look. Now it's time to set you the first exercise to do, and that's what we're going to cover in the next section. I'll see you then.